starting this particular nose and mouth. Again, before I got started, I kind of erased all my grid lines. You want to get rid of them early on. A lot of the face in this particular picture is mostly light grays, and there are a lot of white spots. So really you can see that I'm really taking it easy on how much pencil lead I'm adding. I don't want to go too dark, and realize that even if you have troubles making those really, really light grays, you can always just use some of the lead that's already on your blending stump to do so. But the skin tone for the most part right over here is all basically a light gray. I'm going to get in there and just kind of blend that lightly in and get rid of my pencil marks and sort of smooth things out. I know there's a couple people just messaged me right now about having some internet problems. It's totally understandable. I've had internet problems today myself, so no big worry. Just try to get back into the class. If you get kicked off for whatever reason, just to keep in mind that you can always rejoin. And what we're doing for the rest of this week is really just finishing up our portraits. If I do anything new, I'll obviously post that video. When we look to the nostril over here, we want to make sure we're not like outlining it nice and dark. What we're doing is we're really looking for where there is a slightly bit more value. And that area on her particular picture is not jet black. So I'm not making it jet black. I'm just kind of darkening it a little bit. Where it does get, and maybe the darkest part of it really is this nostril part. It's right underneath. Now again, we don't want to do like a dark, heavy outline, but we do want to get a nice edge between the nostril and that underneath part. And I want to realize that we do have, because the lighting is overhead, we do have a little bit of dark gray value, some of the darkest value in our picture just underneath that. So realize that for this part of the nose, I'm not outlining anything really heavily. I'm definitely not putting any lines up here, and I'm really just going by it's slightly darker there. Now I do want to make sure that shadow sort of separates itself from the nostril, that it doesn't all blend into one thing. So I am adding a little bit more gray. Again, I'm sort of blending all that in. Now, the tip of the nose, this is an important section that does require a little bit of light gray. And if you're nervous about using the pencil on that kind of area, you can see if you have a dirty blending stump, you already probably have more than enough pencil lead on the actual stump to do this part. So to make that little white spot in the middle stand out, you're going to have to add gray. And I'm doing that right now with my blending stump lightly, and that way you can see I'm actually leaving that sort of highlight in there. It looks a little bit lighter on the screen off the camera than what it does in real life, but trust me, I am adding a little bit of gray in and around there, especially underneath, right on this part of the tip of the nose. Again, this nostril on this side, slightly higher than the other one. That one's going to be pretty dark. And again, the shading underneath the nose is kind of important over here. Got that sort of little triangular kind of shape underneath, and I'm going to blend all that in. The nostril on this side, very similar. The lighting's very symmetrical, so it's just a little bit darker than the cheek is behind it. I'm going to kind of add a little bit of that gray. Going to try to, oops, some of my Snicker wrappers. No trick-or-treaters came by the other day, so Mr. B has been eating all the candy all week, which is fine. I do what I like. As long as my wife is sleeping, I can get away with anything. That was a joke for anybody who's listening right now. I'm going to darken that up. Darken up the nostril over there. It's a lot of subtle gray, but it's important that you get that gray in there to kind of get the overall feel of what's going on the mouth. I think I picked this one out because you had done all the light gray, but you kind of missed getting some of the shading of the nose, and that's where I'm going to kind of just darken in those nostrils a little bit, but I think you can kind of see now what's going on with that. And again, it's still a bit lighter than what it needs to be, but I always told you, I'd rather you go a little bit too light than go too dark. You can always come back there when you want to make it a little bit darker. So that would be the nose. Notice how there's no heavy outline around the edges here. There's no lines over here. It's all just a lot of subtle gray. And you can put a little bit more gray if you want over here near the bridges of the nose, but we're not going to do any sort of lines. Now for the lips, I'm going to get in there and do this little divot. Little indentation. Just a little bit too dark. Lighten it up. Now for the lips, important things over here. One of the biggest things, and this is for a lot of you, is getting that dark corner of the mouth. That little recess, usually where the lips end and it turns into the cheek, it's usually sort of a slightly deeper part and usually catches a lot of the light. So you want to make sure that you get those dark spots over there. We also have, in this particular case, we have a little bit of shadow in the middle part over here. I don't want this to be one dark, heavy line across, but it is important that we do get that bit of darkness and shading in that implied line. Otherwise, what happens is that we don't really have separation in the lips. It doesn't look like lips. For most of you, in this picture is kind of how it's going to be for most of you, is that your upper lip is going to be a little bit darker than your lower lip, most likely. It's usually, if the light is coming above, it's going to catch a little more shadow underneath here. So it's a good thing to do is to start with some gray. And I'll just kind of like gray out that top lip a little bit just to give it like a base. And then I'm going to look in the actual picture. It's just a touch darker in the corners here on the edges, and a touch darker right here in the middle. And I'm going to come back and just add a little bit more of that little value and kind of blend it in. Now, if you watched me on one of my earlier videos, when I was doing the shading on my wife's face, I mean, I could spend 30-40 minutes doing just the lips. You know, there's a lot of information and detail and stuff that you can get in there. So, you know, this is like a 4 or 5 minute version of that. Realize that, you know, it gets the job done, but there is endless information in here for you guys to get. But first things first, we have like the basic shape and shading of that upper lip. And again, another important element is, notice I didn't outline the lip, all right? Unless you're doing that sort of, you know, pencil makeup around your lips to outline them, which I would recommend against, because it's always kind of a rough look. But if you don't have a line around your lips, don't create one. It's all just about having a nice crisp edge around there. The lower lip ends up being a bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of that gray from my blending stump, and I'm going to leave that little spot in the middle white. So, you know, if I don't put gray over there, I can't really get that highlight. And that little highlight is one of those things that's going to help the lips look, you know, nice, full, and realistic. If I look at the picture carefully, I get a little bit of gray here, and I'm going to be careful to kind of blend that in and not create a dark outline. I got a little bit of gray on this side as well. Okay, again, careful not to create a heavy dark outline. And then really the most important part of this one for the lower lip is not so much outlining the bottom, is creating that shadow underneath the lip. It creates the depth, it makes it stand out, pop out, and those shadows are really important. So make sure that you're looking for them and adding them, again, because that's what's going to make the face look like you. And I know that the lips and the nose, they're one of the more challenging parts of the face, and they're challenging basically because they're subtle. You know, it's not like it's hard line. Like, you could even almost outline the eyes and you're not going to screw them up. But the lips and the nose, they require a lot of really like soft, subtle shading. And that shading is the kind of shading that requires a little bit more sensitivity and a little bit more of a touch with it. So sometimes it requires just that you're a little bit more experienced. But that is okay. You need to kind of show you the way. So again, this is my quick sort of sloppy copy, but this would be at least how I got these particular lips started. And once again, I'll let you know that you could spend 20-30 minutes working on this part of the face, I'm spending only like about 5 here. So definitely don't rush it. But that would be my version of those lips. Again, this is not so different than everybody else's, but if these happen to be yours,